Let's be real guys, for the most part, this generation of gaming has been pretty lackluster when it comes to game releases. Now there are definitely some heavy hitters, especially last year, as 2023 was fantastic for games. But as a whole, it seems like there are way more misses than hits these days. Now there could be quite a few reasons for this. Obviously the pandemic slowed things down in the world of game development.
At their lunchtime, they spray it down. At the second break, they spray it down. And at the end of the shift, they spray it down. So that each workstation is being cleaned 5 times throughout the day.
But I think a bigger factor is publishers not really knowing or caring about what dedicated gamers actually want. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that throughout this video. Over the past decade, gaming has really shifted from an art form into a business. Once people in suits started running game companies, it was only a matter of time before things started going downhill. Look at our friends in Activision Blizzard as a prime example of this. There was a point in time when companies took pride in producing timeless games that would inspire generations for years to come. I think this can be seen the most during the N64 PlayStation 1 era, when technology wasn't really good enough to produce games with great graphics, so developers had to make their games better by improving the gameplay or the storytelling. In the generation after that, we saw graphics finally starting to look decent, relative to animations you would see on a TV show. But the quality of games as a whole was still really strong at this point, because the tech that allowed for good graphics was still a fairly new thing. This might be a wild statement, so please bear with me while I do try my best to explain it, but I think the generation after, aka the PS3, Xbox 360 era, was the last generation of real good games. This generation saw so many changes to the gaming world as a whole. Online gaming became the standard, with single-player experiences taking a backseat. We saw the introduction of subscription-based online services from Microsoft and Sony, and graphics and games started getting good, and I mean really good. I remember seeing the iconic trailer for Gears of War 2 everywhere on TV, and literally not believing that was a video game. I felt like that grandma that watched a clip of Grand Theft Auto and thought it was an actual news broadcast.
Oh my god. Oh. Oh.
Gears of War was only the beginning though. During this generation, we saw the release of amazing looking games like Mass Effect, Final Fantasy XIII, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, God of War 3, and so many more. The future really seemed brighter than ever for gaming now that technology this powerful was so easily accessible to developers. But in the gaming generation after this, all games kind of started feeling samey, if that makes sense. Now don't get me wrong, the PS4 had some bangers. Bloodborne and Final Fantasy VII Remake are both in my all-time top 10. But again, let's be real, one of those is a remake and the other one is just a fun take on the Dark Souls formula. This generation really saw an increase in games using that fixed third-person over-the-shoulder camera angle. God of War 2018, Horizon, Ghost of Tsushima, and about 1,000 other games. And yeah, all of those games are decent and look really solid, they just lack their own unique style. Listen, you can put those 3 games side by side and hardly tell them apart from each other. So even though they may look objectively good, I often feel like I'm just playing the same game over and over again when it comes to these big AAA titles. This brings me to my next point, good graphics versus art style. I was playing Persona 3 Reload yesterday, by the way, fantastic game so far, and my girlfriend made a comment about the people in the back having no faces, which led to me discovering that you could actually walk right through them like they don't exist. Now this might seem like a huge mistake from the dev team, but I'd argue that Persona 3 Reload is a better looking game than any of those previously mentioned over-the-shoulder camera games. It's not more realistic looking by any means, but what it has that those games lack is personality. Personality is something that AAA games just really lack in general these days. Going back to that comment about people in suits being out of touch with what gamers actually want, it seems like most games are made for the sole purpose of making a quick buck, rather than being fun for a long period of time. I've made videos talking about microtransactions and subscription services playing a factor, but I'd argue that graphics play just as big of a role. It seems so many companies are just focusing on making the best looking game and not really focusing on making sure that the game is unique or even fun to play. Some people find themselves going back to retro games for nostalgia, whereas I find myself going back to retro games often just because I think they were a lot better. If I just wanted to watch something that looks good, I would throw on Game of Thrones and call it a day. At the end of the day, the gameplay loop has to be fun and enjoyable too, it can't just be graphics. I've been asked numerous times about why I crap on Sony and Microsoft way more than Nintendo, and it's not because I think Nintendo is less scummy of a company, it's because I enjoy Nintendo games more as a whole. I think the decision made during the Wii era to not really compete with Sony and Microsoft in the console wars was probably the best decision they ever made as a company, because having an underpowered console forces them to focus on making good games instead of games that look good. And again, I'd argue that even though most people would say the graphics on Nintendo games are lacking compared to PS5 and Xbox titles, I think they look better because of the art style and the personality. Anyways guys, that's it for me today. We're hovering around that 1,000 sub mark, so your boy can finally start collecting that sweet ad revenue soon. Thank you all so much for making that happen. Keep in mind, I try to keep things as genuine as possible on here. These are my opinions and my takes on gaming. If you don't like or agree with them, that's totally fine. Freedom of speech, baby. But if you did enjoy the video, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really want to support, you can consider becoming a channel member or just watch some of my other videos. As always guys, take care and I'll see you in the next one.